Okay, awesome. So we are ready to go. We're going to talk about objects, classes, and instances today. So if you can see up, I've got our learning goals, but we want to talk more about a class. I know you all saw what a class was yesterday working with Mike. We want to talk about the differences between a class and an instance of that class and what all those words mean. We want to store state. Which is like how we describe something, the qualities about something, in instance variables and initialize, and we'll get into all of this. We want to have access to that state using what we call attr readers or attr accessors. We want to write some methods, so we have behaviors for our class and our instances. And then we want to create a new instance of a class and call some methods on it. Oh, maybe I should let Mike into the room. Maybe. All right. I think, so let's just do a quick warm up. Just let me start that. So in your notebook, I'm going to have you brainstorm a type of object and specific instances of that object. Also some different attributes and behaviors. So like, for example, and so no one can use the example of a dog, because that's what I'm going to use. So if we have an object of a dog, specific instances of this dog might be Athena, who is Mike's dog, or Odell, who is Meg's dog, or Brownie, who is my neighbor's dog. So these are very specific instances of this object. And some of the attributes I can identify are like name of the dog, the age, the breed, and some behaviors of that dog might be to eat or sleep or go for a walk. So what I'd like you to do is spend about 4 minutes and in your notebook, brainstorm a type of object and come up with what is a specific instance of that object look like, what are different attributes and behaviors of those objects. So go ahead and start that now. If you feel like you've got that object, maybe come up with another type of object that might interact with the object that you've already created. Let's take about 30 more seconds to wrap up your thoughts. All right, so let's come back together. And I would love to hear from maybe just one or two of you about the type of object that you picked. Karen, would you like to come off mute and share what type of object you picked and some instances and examples?
Sure. The object that I picked was flowers.
Okay.
And the specific instances, I was thinking of like events, so like wedding or funeral or congratulations or graduation.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, what was the object you chose again?
Flowers.
A flower like this?
Like a flower, yeah.
Okay. And so like the specific type, oh, I see what you're saying, like a specific type of flower, like a graduation flower?
Yeah.
Okay.
Graduation or like wedding or funeral.
Okay.
And the attributes are color, smell, and I came up with gift, like gift question mark.
Okay. Yeah. So like if the flower is a gift or not. All right. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And behaviors are to deliver or send, and display and add message.
Okay. Awesome. Very cool. So we've got like this gift flower. And so we have some very specific instances of this gift flower object. It's specifically for giving this for like a graduation, a wedding, or so different types of occasions. And then it's got some attributes, which are qualities about it, how we can describe the specific one, because maybe this graduation flower is yellow, but the wedding flower would be pink. So they're very specific attributes. And then each of them have behaviors for things they can do. They can be delivered or sent or displayed and add messages. So awesome. That's a great example. Thank you, Karen, for sharing. Cool. So let's get into why we did this exercise and what we're talking about. So in programming, when we talk about a class is something that models state and behavior. So class. Can you all see my notes okay? Okay, awesome. Thank you for the thumbs up. That really helps. I'll try to keep notes, but it's hard to type while I talk, so I will do my best. And remember too, I want to remind you that you can use the raise hand feature if you have a question, and don't be afraid to press that at all. So a class in programming is something that models behavior, well, I'll say state, which are like attributes, and behavior. Okay, so state is what something is, like the flowers is pink or is sweet smelling, is a gift, is not a gift. So that is what state is, where behavior is what something does, right? So those are the actions. I think of the state, those are like the nouns that describe it, and the behavior is the verbs that this thing can perform. So if we think also about the dog class the example I gave at the beginning, if we have a class of dog, what were the attributes of a dog? So things that would describe a specific dog. Todd, do you want to come off mute? Do you remember, or can you think of your own attributes of some things that we would use to describe what a dog is?
Breed comes to mind. Age.
Yeah.
Weight.
Sure. And maybe a name. I like my dog.
Name, yeah.
Have a name. Yeah. This is
Yeah, I
perfect.
named my dog too.
Exactly. So thank you so much, Todd. So our class, our dog class, is what's going to model this. And then if we think about specific instances of this class, so like the class is like the cookie cutter of a dog, and the class kind of sets up these descriptions of how we would describe the dogs, but then we need to come up with our own specific dog. So we might have Fido, and then we'll have Athena, and we'll have Odell. And these are very specific dogs who have specific breeds, age, weight, name. They have attributes that are very specific to them as an instance of this dog class. How about behaviors? What behaviors would this dog class have? Jake H. So I don't know if I need the H. I'm still getting used to all the names. So
I think I'm the only Jake, so I think you're good there.
okay, thank you.
So behaviors, you could have bark, sit, eat, walk.
Yeah, definitely. So all the dogs from the class should be able to do these things, and maybe they do them a little differently depending on their specific attributes, but they would still be able to act and do these behaviors. Great, thank you, Jake. Okay, so let's look at an actual example. So I'm having trouble talking today. So let's look at both syntax and an example of a dog class. So I'm trying to move these Zoom screens everywhere. All right, so the first thing what I'll say in terms of like syntax is when we're creating a class, each class gets its own file. Okay, so if you'll notice in my file tree on the left-hand side here, within my project directory, so objects, classes, instances, I've got a file called dog.rb. Right, so dog singular, let's see, file name is singular, and is the name of the class. I know I'm moving everything around on you. Okay, so I have got my file name, which is dog.rb. So that lets me know right away from my file tree that this file is going to be holding a class of dog, so my dog class. Remember, these classes are like a blueprint. So whenever I want to create a dog instance, so a specific dog object, I'm going to need to go to my blueprint to kind of create that. So it's either like a blueprint or like a cookie cutter. And then we can set, and we'll see this in a little bit, we'll set the attributes, like these qualities for the specific dog instance we're creating. Now, one thing I'll note, I'm going to use the word instance and object interchangeably. Right now, they mean the same exact thing. Okay, so when I create a dog, Fido would be an instance of the dog class or a dog object. Same with Athena would be another instance of the dog class or a dog object. Okay. So to create a class, we actually only need 3 words, 3 things. So we need our keyword of class. We need the name of the class capitalized, and then an end. That's a class. We just created a class. Now, this is not a very useful class or a helpful class right now, but it is still a class. Okay. Another thing I'll note on syntax is, like, say you had a class of dog park, so it's 2 words, you would write it like this, just called either upper camel case or Pascal case. Just make each word capitalized. Okay. So that's what it would look like if you had a 2-word class. Okay. Any questions yet on what we have talked about so far about the class being a blueprint, about us using this blueprint to create instances or the initial syntax of creating a class? Sydney.
So are there ever instances where you have classes that don't have behaviors, or like it's hard to, because I was like going through mine and I had fruit
Uh-huh.
and I was going through other fruits, and then when I got to behavior, I was like,
Well, maybe a fruit could ripen, or it could
Okay.
rot, or it could, I don't know, what else could a fruit do? Maybe it could be eaten.
okay, I got it.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, great question. Oh, how do I put your hand down? There we go. Okay. Otherwise, I'll keep calling on you. All right. So let's talk about creating an actual instance. So in the class files, the only thing we want is the class, is that blueprint. So we wouldn't want any other code down here. We wouldn't want any code anywhere else. The class should only contain the class. Like we'll have stuff inside between the class and the end, which we'll get to that. But this might make more sense as I go on a little bit more. So if we want to run this file and actually create an instance of our dog class, I'm going to use a runner file, which actually I don't think I created. Nope. Okay, so I'm going to touch a runner.rb. So now that should be there. And then I'm going to use this file as kind of like my entry point into this dog class. So since this file is not the same file, they are at the same level of depth. See how they're not nested? So what I have to do in my runner is require in the dog file. So I'm going to use require dog. It's technically dog.rb, but if you're an RB file requiring an RB file, you don't need the .rb. So what this require does is before it runs any code that I put below here, it's going to pull in the blueprint from this dog.rb file. So it'll pull in my blueprint. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to use this blueprint to create a instance. So here's what I'll do. Anyone know how the word we use to create a new instance? It's actually a method. Anyone know what that method is? No? All right. Let's, so it's new. Oh, Hope, you were raising your hands. I'm sorry. I have to get used to this because prior to this inning, I would let people just come off mute, but I think that created a lot of like confusion. So Michael, do you want to come off mute and help me out here? Like what would I write to create a new instance of a dog?
Yeah, you could call the class, so capital DOG.new.
Yeah, exactly.
And also I had a question about describing a behavior.
Okay.
I was wondering, how would we think or describe a method of displacement? So like changing the attributes of the object being in the X, Y, and Z planes. Like how would we change, like say like I have a cup and the cup moved.
Yeah.
How would I go about even thinking about that or, describing that in code?
And you mean like specifically, you want to describe a location that this cup exists in?
Yeah, like a change in location, like
Yeah, so
something being moved. Yeah.
Yeah, let's say like you had some kind of plane, like an XYZ plane or axis, and you could plot points. So maybe the points that this cup exists are stored as attributes, right? So it would be these attributes. Maybe if you had the cup, some of the attributes could be like the X position, the Y position. Oh gosh, you're gonna make me type words. And the Z position. Okay, and then maybe you have some behaviors that it's like an X shift or something, or a Y shift. So those methods or behaviors that you would call would actually change the value of the attributes to indicate that there has been a shift or that it's in a new position.
Cool. I might be getting way ahead of myself and like just complicating things. But I was thinking of like a method of like pour bottle.
Yeah.
And I thought, going back to the abstraction concept of yesterday, like the outer concept would be just to pour the bottle, but then you would be like, the more complex would be like, make sure it goes below like the 0 degree, so then the water kind of can fall out.
Yeah, and I think you don't need to think about that minutia just yet.
Okay.
So hopefully as we go through these examples, it might help a little bit to see like how we would describe the behaviors, but we might not have to get that detailed.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Yeah. Karen, did you have a question?
Yeah, so right before Michael asked his question, you were explaining why we have a runner file and why we call, or why we require .dog. Can you say that again?
Yeah. So I don't want to run the class file. Well, actually, let me show you what's going to happen here. So I'm in my class directory. Let me make this a little bigger, right? So you could see when I did that ls, you could see all my files. So I can run my dog file here, and it ran, but it's not going to do anything because I have everything inside this the class in the end. So to get access to this and to interact with this class and create new instances, I want to create a runner file and then I can initiate that interaction from the runner file. So I can run my Ruby runner.rb. Technically, it did create a new dog instance, but I didn't stop the program or anything. But we have to, in this file, a runner.rb, if in order for this file to know about this blueprint, this class, we have to require in the file that contains that information. Otherwise, it's not going to know. Actually, that's a good, so let's not require it in. And now if I run that file, I actually get an error. It says uninitialized constant dog. It doesn't know what this capital D dog is referring to. So when I require in this file, now Ruby says, oh, you're referring to this class of dog that you created and you want to make a new instance of that class. So now we wouldn't get that error. Whoops. Cool. Great question, Karen. Jake, go ahead.
So is that runner file kind of similar to like the mini test files that we saw in Ruby, just to kind of, I guess, what are you using this runner file for?
Just to display some interaction, because I actually don't have test files right now. So you could run a lot of this interaction from a test file, but since I don't have those right now, I can use this runner file to interact with my class. Okay, so let's do this. I'm gonna put a pry here. So require pry, binding pry. Are you all familiar with this? I think you played with it in Mod 0. Okay, oh, it's kind of, yeah, we're gonna play with it a lot more. So I'm gonna put that in here. And so now what should happen is when I run my Ruby, or that runner file, I hit my pry. So now, did it create a new dog? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Some people are not sure. Yes, okay. How can I interact with this new dog instance? Think about your lesson from yesterday. How can I store this dog instance so I can actually interact with it? Jake?
You'd need to assign it to a variable first to call back.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope, do you want to show me how would I store this dog instance in a variable?
Sure. Okay, so go to before the dog, and then we'll say Fido equals dog.new.
Awesome. Yes. So remember, with this single equal sign, that's an assignment operator, the right-hand side is evaluated first, and whatever that evaluates to, then it is stored in this variable. Okay, so I'm hoping that this creates a new dog instance for me, or a new dog object, and it will store it in a variable called Fido. So I'm gonna run my runner.rb file again, and I'm gonna call on my variable of Fido, and this is what a dog instance looks like. in our pry session. So what this is, there's this little hashtag #. It says dog, which indicates what type of object this is, what class it was created from. And then this is a location in memory, or an object ID. So we can actually do, there's a method we could use called object ID that would spit out that object ID for us if we needed to know like where it was stored in memory. Connor.
Yeah, just curious. We used IRB in Mod 0. Is there a big difference between pry and IRB that we should probably switch to?
So with IRB, you're usually just getting into that from the terminal by typing IRB literally.
Yeah.
What we did here is we stuck a pry into our code so that when we run this file, when it hits line 5, it'll drop us into a pry session. And then we can use the interaction. Because if we just typed like pry here, I wouldn't have access to Fido.
Okay.
I have to hit the pry by running this file. And maybe IRB does that, but I don't know what that is. We typically just use pry.
Okay, so I'll install pry. Thank you.
Absolutely install.
Oh, yeah.
Gem install pry. Good to go. All right. I feel like, okay. So we looked at Fido. Let's make another dog. Let's do Athena. Well, so same thing here. So now we should have 2 dog instances, and we can look at those. So if I run my runner file, remember Ruby runs in order top of a file, like line 1 down to the end of the file. So it's going to require in this dog class so it knows it has a blueprint. It's going to create Fido, then it's going to create Athena, and then we'll hit our pry. So at the time we hit the pry, these 2 dog instances should be created. And we can test that here. Okay, so we can look at Fido and we see, all right, we got a dog instance with its specific ID, object ID. And then if we look at Athena, awesome, we have another dog instance with a different ID. You see these numbers, the object IDs are slightly different. And we can check that here too, Fido.objectID and then Athena.objectID. So you can see that these are actually 2 different instances. And you probably won't ever need to use the method object ID ever. It's just something we can use right now to look. Aiden. Aiden, I think you're on mute, or I can't hear you. Oh, no, you're not on mute, but I can't hear you. That's right, we're getting out all the Zoom kinks today. Aiden, I'm gonna go to Jesse and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Jesse.
So saving our instance into a variable, is this the only way that we can interact with an instance of a class, or is it just the easiest for us?
No, it is gonna be the only way that you can interact with it. Because if you just created this one dog like that, it's created, but then you don't have, for now, I'll say in mod 1, for now you don't have a way to interact with that second dog that was created. We don't have like a tie to it.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, typically you're gonna wanna store your instances and variables.
Okay.
Okay. Aiden, do you wanna try again?
Yes.
Woohoo!
Okay. So would the object ID be referencing a memory location or something else, or is it just a random number that they assigned for it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm pretty sure it's referencing a memory location. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's referencing where it's being stored in memory.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, cool. So, okay, we made some instances, but we haven't really done anything like really interesting yet. What I want to talk about then is adding attributes to these dogs, right? Because we can create instances, but they're kind of useless until we can add attributes to them to describe how these dogs are different, right? Fido should probably have a breed and a name and an age, which will be different than Athena's name, breed, and age. And we want a way to store that information. So what we do to store that information is we use something called an instance variable. And, oh, where's my notes? So an instance variable is used to store information. I'll say attributes, not information. I'm just going to say state or attributes about an instance. Okay, and then for syntax, it's a variable that starts with a @ sign. All right, there's our POM timer. So maybe we should, this is probably a good stopping point before I get too much into how to use our instance variables. So I will stop here. So let's take a 5-minute POM and we will come back at 9:38.
Thank you, 38.
You're welcome, 38. All right, I see all your faces. So it looks like most of you are back. I definitely encourage you when we take those POMs to, as much as you don't want to, like stand up and get away from your computer, walk around, think about something not code related. When you move your focus away from the actual thing you're learning, it allows it to like, I have these images of it being like water, right? And it like flows through your brain. So it can, when you get up and do something different, so it can access different parts of your brain, different memories, and start making those connections. So if anyone here's read that book, Mind for Numbers, it talks a lot about this, the science behind it. Yes. Oh, great job, Carson. Just talk to Carson. She'll tell you all about it. All right, cool. So let's get into instance variables and how we can actually get these attributes onto our instances that we're creating. So we're going to use instance variables, and typically these instance variables are created in a method called initialize, which you will spell wrong at least 5 times in your coding career. So just be prepared for that. I see some nods. So in a method called initialize is where we create these instance variables. Okay. Now initialize is a special method that we don't actually call directly, but it is called by Ruby when we call .new. And initialize runs once when right after .new is called, right here. So we don't have an initialize yet, so we're going to define it. So remember from your lesson from yesterday, so think to yourself how we would do this. If I want to define a method called initialize, how would I just define that method? Let's see who I'm at. Taylor, do you want to come off mute and help me just define a method called initialize?
Yeah, so you would just do def initialize and then end.
Awesome. Perfect. That's all I was looking for. Thanks, Taylor. So, right. So I think sometimes we jump into like maybe the minutia, or we might get ahead of ourselves or get too complicated. But at the end of the day, right now, all we want is just create a method called initialize. Okay, so we will not call this method directly. But Ruby calls initialize after we call .new, and this is where we can set up our instance variables. So an instance variable, as I mentioned with this syntax, has an @ sign in front of it, and maybe we want this dog to have this a name. We want it to have a name, but we need to assign it, right? Because this is still a variable, even though it looks a little different, it's still a variable, so we need to assign it. So we want to assign it to information that the user passes in when initializing or instantiating a new dog instance. So what we're gonna do, actually, before I do that, let me show this. So okay, I want to show how this is being ran. Right? So every time we call .new, this initialize method runs automatically 1 time. So if we run this, we should see this string of puts new dog being created. How many times should we see that in my terminal? Interesting. I have some ones and some twos. So let's see what it is. So I'm going to run my runner file, and it was twice, right? And it's twice because I'm creating 2 dog instances. So the first line, dog3, the dog.new runs. And when we call .new, Ruby will automatically run the initialize method as well. And then when we call dog.new again, it runs initialize for that instance. Okay, so let me clarify what I said. It runs initialize once per instance, per dog instance being created. Okay, so every time I create a new dog instance, that initialize method runs 1 time. Okay. Cool. Questions? Okay. So, Will.
Hey, Kat, this is maybe a little broader of a question, but just curious if you know, but is this sort of process you've described consistent across other object-oriented languages or just Ruby? The idea of a definitionalize and...
That is a great question. And there are, I don't know, to be honest. I'm trying to think of some other like object, like if you make JavaScript an object-oriented language, you do have a similar kind of convention, but it's not called initialize. And even in other languages, a lot of times there is this idea of setting up either state or setting up the attributes as soon as a thing is initialized or instantiated, but it might not be called initialized, and syntax-wise, it probably looks different.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just meant conceptually, so that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. All right, so let's actually get some, let's actually get some attributes into our dog. We don't have any state yet. So I mentioned that we want to have a name. Oh gosh. Okay. We also know maybe we want to have a breed and we want to have an age. So when we think about where we want to get this information from, it's information where we want to be passed in from the user. So, and from the user, I mean this runner file, right? So when a new dog is created or instantiated, at that time, we want to pass in this information that sets up its state, sets up its attributes. So let's pass it an argument, right? Yesterday in your methods lesson, you probably learned about how if you have a method, if you want to pass it arguments, you just put parentheses right after the method name. So this dog, we want it to have a name of Fido, a breed of, oh goodness, lab. Let's just make it a lab. So I don't have to think of breeds. And an age of 2. Okay. So now there's no way to, like, there's no labels on these that says this is the name, this is the breed, this is the age. So those labels are going to come from the actual method definition. Okay, so remember, if we want a method to take arguments, then in the method definition we're writing, after the name of the method, we can add arguments. So here we want whatever comes in. Ooh, actually, here's a question for you. Everyone think to yourself for a second. In my .new, how many arguments is this method taking? Am I telling it that this method is taking? Well, I saw too many fingers on some of your screens. John, that was you. John, how many arguments is this method taking?
It's taking 3.
Awesome. Yes. So one argument, 2 arguments, 3 arguments. Okay, so it means I need to define in my initialize the 3 arguments that are coming in. So we want the first argument to represent the name, the second argument to represent the breed, and the third argument to represent the age. I'm going to put a pry over here. So when I put my pry here inside the method, then whenever, but I'm going to run this runner file, whenever the code in the runner file causes this method to be called and then Ruby to run this method, it should hit my pry and stop so that I can interact with whatever variables I have available to me at that time. So let's run the runner file real quick. Okay, cool. So I'm inside of my def-initialized because on line 3 of my runner file, I'm calling .new, and .new will cause initialize to run. Okay, so now I'm inside the method, so I have access to whatever these variable names are, right? So what should name be holding? Think to yourself for a second. A good practice with code is to make an assumption like of what a variable holds or what a method will return, make the assumption and then play with it and pry to either confirm your assumption or show you that maybe your logic might be a little bit off and you need to go back and run through it again. Right, so name is holding the string of Fido. Is that what you expected? Okay, because this is just coming from right here. I'm calling the method here and passing these arguments. Breed should be holding the string of lab, and then age is holding an integer of 2. Okay, so I have access to those variables, and now what I want to do is I want to store this information that's coming through initialize. I want to store those in the instance variables. So I'm going to assign at name to what? What do you think? Take a second. What am I going to assign at name to? Joshua, do you have any guesses on what I'm going to assign my instance variable of at name to?
Yep, name.
Yeah, awesome. Perfect. How about the next ones? Sorry, you have to drink.
Sorry. Breed for at breed and age for at age.
Yeah. Right. So I'm taking in whatever we passed in when we called .new, whatever that first argument is, it's being stored in this variable called name. And then I'm going to take that and assign it to the instance variable. Okay. There's a reason we have to assign it to this instance variable. This is what sets it up as an attribute or as state. You'll learn about scope in a couple lessons as well. I don't want to talk too much about that, but our instance variable is now, any method can call this instance variable now. If we just had it as a normal variable, we could not call that variable from other methods, but as an instance variable, we can. Now I have these named the same thing, but I want to show you that we don't have to do that. And I do see that there's a question, so give me just 1 second. Maybe I call this name info. Maybe I call this one banana. That makes 0 sense, but the point I'm trying to illustrate is this variable does not need to be the same as this one. It's just kind of helpful if you keep them the same. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. When you're coming back to the instance variable, when you had the syntax of the @ sign in front of the name, and you said, now we can call it from anywhere, and then you said when you took it away, you couldn't. Why is that?
It has to do with scope. So a regular variable or a local variable is scoped to the method it's created in, which means you can only call that variable from that method, but an instance variable is scoped to the entire class. So you can call that instance variable from anywhere in the class.
Okay, cool.
Cool. And you'll have a whole lesson just on scope. So don't worry, you'll get much more into that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't like banana. That doesn't make any sense. Variables should always make sense to the data that they're holding. But I just want to illustrate here that the name of your arguments does not have to be the same as the name of your instance variable. Okay. All right, let's see what this did for us. Ooh, we're going to get an error. And let's see what the error is and if you can figure out why we got this error. So this is saying wrong number of arguments, given 0, expected 3. In my, where did it hit this? Initialize, well, my dog.rb from runner line 5. So it means on line 5, tried to call .new, our initialize expected 3 arguments, but we're giving it 0 arguments, so it's going to error out. So we need to add our arguments here. So let's give Athena is I have no idea what breed. She's a mix. How's that? And she's 3. So let's run our runner file. Okay, great. So no errors. We hit our pry. So now let's look at our instances again. So if we stored our dog instance, the first one in Fido. So now Fido, the object, has a little bit more information on it. And these represent those instance variables. That's the state or the attributes that we have set up this specific instance with. Okay? Fido and Athena have different attributes. They are both dog instances, but they have different attributes. Okay. Questions about that yet, Jake?
So I kind of noticed this when I was looking at the war peace thing last night too. Is there a reason that when you look at each, like the Fido, that the age, breed, and name don't come in the same order, or does that matter at all?
It alphabetizes them.
Okay.
Yeah, so no need to worry about that. You can put that in whatever order you want here, usually in order that makes more sense to you. And then Ruby here just alphabetizes them.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we've set up some attributes. Joshua, go ahead.
Yeah, if hypothetically you were accessing multiple files, so multiple classes, when you call to see like the instant variables of a object, for the example you had, you just typed Fido. But if you had a second class, would you have to like specify which class you're calling? So you would have to put dog.fido.
Well, that wouldn't be a second class though, right? Because that's still the dog class. So you would, if you wanted, well, let me say this. If we want these instances to have specific behaviors, like maybe we wanted them to have the behavior of a bark, then we would have to do something like Fido.bark.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Yep, because when we call a method, we want to call it on a very specific object. So this method doesn't exist right now, but we did Fido.bark. It would be different than calling Athena.bark. Like both of them would be calling the same behavior, the same method that would be in this dog class. So maybe there's something like that, and tells the dog to bark, does something, right? So calling the .bark on the object would cause this method to run. So you do have to call it on a specific instance.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I have definitely been talking too much and doing too much. So I'm gonna give you all some time to practice. One thing I'll say too is that so typically attributes are something we want to persist. So it's information we want to, like Athena is always gonna be named Athena. Okay, once we initialize that dog instance. So when we have information that we want to persist, that's when we define them in this initialize method. Because remember, how many times does initialize ever run? Just one time. When we first initialize the instance, when we call .new, that's the only time initialize will run. So when we have information that we want to persist, we typically set it as an instance variable in the initialize method. Okay, we'll come back to this many times. So what I'm going to do is put you into some small groups so you can practice this. Okay, I'm trying to find, okay, here we go. So what you're gonna do, I'm gonna add this to your Slack channel, the instructions, but you're gonna create a person class. So class of person. So there hopefully will be about 3 of you, 2 to 3 of you in each group. One of you is gonna be the driver. So you're gonna share your screen and do the typing and then the rest of the group converses. I mean, you as the driver will converse also to help write this code. But you're gonna need to create a new directory. You're gonna need to put, whoops, You're going to need to put a file in your directory, maybe 2 files, depending on this class you're creating. And then there's some instructions. You'll create some attributes for this person instance as well. Okay, so I'm going to drop this in your Slack channel. It's in the main 2008 backend, and then I'm going to put you into breakout rooms and send you off, and we'll spend maybe maybe about 7 minutes, but I'm going to pop around to the groups to see how you're doing. Okay. All right. Any questions on what you're doing before I send you off? Okay. Sydney.
Sorry, I don't have a question on what we're doing. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Since we are, like, for example, for the age, the argument that you put in the definitionalize, we're not telling it that it has to be an integer, because technically someone could be a float.
Yeah.
Right. So is that okay? Like if one dog.new you put in an integer and one dog.new you put in a float?
Yeah.
Can
you do that? Yes, you can, right? Because with Ruby, there's no restrictions on what data type is being sent in. So that's something you need to be very aware of when you're initializing, is what data type should this argument be? Should it be a string? Should it be an integer? Should it be a float? Also, you could do things in here to force it to be a specific data type, right? So if you bring in your age and you do like 2i, that's going to force anything that comes in to turn into an integer if it can. So that's some stuff you can do to make sure your data is clean, but that is a really good thing to think about. Sean, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I may have missed it. Are we doing like a driver navigator or both independently?
Yeah, no, so I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. I would love for one of you to share your screen to actually type it, so to be a driver, and then the rest of the members of the group are the navigators, but you're all going to work together to complete the task of creating that person class. Okay? All right. This stuff is going to feel very foreign, right, until you get into it and start creating it. So just know that I understand you're probably feeling confused and uncomfortable. That is normal. It'll pass. All right, here we go. All right, you should have your breakout rooms, so go ahead and move into those.
So my question is specifically about the pry. So I have that all installed and everything. However, when I put it in my runner file, and then run that in terminal, it just gives me another like line. It doesn't actually go into pry. That makes sense.
Yeah, so you have it like set up like this, but it doesn't pop into pry?
Correct, yeah. So if you go, because when you're going to your terminal, you're just doing Ruby runner.rb, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, mine essentially just gives you a new terminal line.
So you might not be hitting the pry. Sometimes you might need to put like a 0 under it, which sounds weird, but pry is kind of invisible. So sometimes you need to put a line of code below it so that it hits it. Or it just might not be hitting it.
Okay.
So try that. If that doesn't work, we can have you screen share to take a look at it.
Yeah, the 0 worked.
Oh, good. Okay. And I don't know why it does that for some people, but not other people. Taylor.
So if you set a default value in the initialize method, will it do type checking then? Like if you set it as an integer, will it expect an integer or no?
No. So like say if we did this one and we did Bob, right? So now if we run this, Athena's age will be Bob, right? So you just have to be very careful with, you have to be very careful with what you send in, and be, very mindful that you're sending in the correct data type.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, good question. All right, cool. So that looks like all the questions. Let's take a 5-minute palm. Let's take a 6-minute palm. Come back at 10:20. Okay, Curtis, go ahead.
So I had a question about the like arguments you pass into initialize. On the pre-work or the Ruby exercises, one of the mythical creatures, like the wizard, you pass in like a symbol in the initialized definition.
Sure.
If you want, like I can share my screen and show you, but like what's the difference between like using a symbol with like a default value and like using a regular instance variable?
Yeah, so a symbol, so if you look here, I passed in now for Fido, the breed is now a symbol of lab. And so now lab is a symbol. So a symbol is just a different kind of data type. It's similar to a string, except it's immutable. So we can't change that. And that a lot of times symbols are used for like labels. So a breed might be a good thing to put as a symbol because it could be a label. So any lab would have the symbol of label as its value. Wait, any lab would have the symbol of lab as its value.
Okay.
So it's just a different data type.
So then like when you, like in your initialize, when you have like the like block variables, like as a symbol, does that mean it will only take like an argument that's a symbol for that?
Wait, a block variable as a symbol? Like if this had a default value, is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah. So like the example I gave was like it's a Boolean and it's like is the wizard bearded? Like and its bearded symbol like and the default value is set to true, but like it will only take like if you say like it will only take like an argument if it's in the format of like bearded equals like true or bearded colon true, bearded colon false. And I was just wondering like why that is and like what use that would be.
I'm not sure exactly what that, because you can set things. Well, if you do like bearded equals like true, then that's a symbol, but it doesn't restrict that argument from coming in as things other than a symbol, except however we write the method, we're going to assume a symbol's coming in. So if it's not a symbol coming in, it might not work properly.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. We can look at that specifically afterwards.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I don't want to take up too much time with it. I was just like curious about that.
Sure. Yeah, one of the things with Ruby is that it's not like once a variable is like a certain thing, like a data type, it's holding a string, you could very easily change that to a different data type, which is not always the best thing.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about accessing this data, because it's, you know, great that we've got the state, these attributes here, but we don't have a way to access those attributes. So what I would love to have is a method that will read that attribute for us, because we can see it right here. We can see the attributes on this object that we're looking at, but I can't like access that information to do anything with it. Like what if I wanted to just know the name of this dog? So I would love to have a method called name that would read back to me the value of whatever this attribute is holding. So whatever the state is. That would be really helpful, because then I could do things with that data. Or if I had something like Fido.age, so that I could know how old this specific dog instance is. So I need a way to access this state, a way to read that state. So how would I do that? I guess if I want a method called name, how would I get a method called name in my class of dog? Joshua, go for it.
You could use the add a reader, or you could define it as a separate method. The add a reader is just like a shortcut, I guess.
Yeah, so let's do it the long way first, and then we'll look at a shortcut. So Joshua, do you want to walk me through how I would write this method?
Sure. Yeah, so you would do def name, and then next line would be at name.
Yeah, right. So this is exactly right. So what we've done here is we've defined a method called name that I can call on one of these dog instances. And then the only job of this method is to look at the attribute, the instance variable of @name, and read back the value that is stored in there. Okay, and this is why we have to make these instance variables so that other methods can see them. Okay, so now if we run this, we've hit our price. So now I can run Fido.name. This method exists and it reads back the value of that instance variable. Okay, same with Athena.name. So now I can call .name for this specific instance and it gives me this specific dog's name. Okay. So now typically we'd want this information for any other of our, all of our state, all of our attributes. So we might want another method called breed that just does this, right? We might want another method called age that reads back the value of the age. Okay, you can see how this can get pretty long and it's very repetitive. So Ruby gives us a shortcut called an attr reader that does exactly this. And so let's look at the syntax of the attr reader. You use the keyword attr reader. You use a symbol that's the same word as the instance variable that you're wanting to read back. Okay. And we can do multiple ones too. So and then we do comma, breed, comma, age. Whoops, no, not add message. Okay. And what this is doing is creating a method of the name and just reading back this instance variable, the value of this instance variable. Same here. Now we have the attr readers creating for us a method called breed that's just reading back the value of this instance variable. So now think to yourself right now, how many methods called name do I have right now? Think to yourself for a second before you throw it up. Okay, so now throw up so I can see your hand, like how many methods do I have called name? Yeah, so a lot of you are holding up a 2. That's correct. So here is a method called name and here is a method called name. Now it's probably not a good idea to have multiple methods called the same thing. So now all this is redundant. We do not need it.
I'm in class.
What? Oh, sorry, someone's off mute.
Oh, sorry about that.
It's all right. Yes, we are talking about classes. Just kidding. So the attr reader gives us a shortcut. The attr reader is creating a method. This is so important. I'm going to write it in our notes. Okay, so the attr reader creates a method. Oh, come on, capitalize. There we go. That reads back that specific instance variable or attribute. Okay, so yes, the name of this, the attr reader method has to match what the instance variable is, or it won't match up and do the shortcut for us. Okay, so let's make sure that that still works. So now I should still be able to do Fido.name, right? Athena.breed. Great. Oh, I didn't change that back. Athena.age, right? So now we can see we have access to all this information and all the attributes about our instances. Sydney?
So just my question is, does it also have to be an argument? The method, does it have to be also one of the arguments? Like, could you have methods? Could you be?
No. I think I know what you're asking, and I think the answer is no. So you're asking if these methods like has to be one of these arguments.
Yes.
No. So,
okay.
And actually, I'm really glad you asked that question, because what if there was something else we wanted to set up on initialize? that wasn't passed through. So what could we store for a dog? Toys. Maybe a dog starts with toys. So maybe we want it to have an attribute of the toys that it likes. And we just want to store maybe a list. Okay, and so whenever we want to store a list, an array is a good data type choice, right? Or maybe just a list of strings like squishy ball and what other toys does the dog have? The rope pulls. I have cats. I do not have dogs. I don't know why I used a dog, but so we might want to store and persist this data and this information about the specific toys that a specific dog instance likes. So we can start that off with an empty array as a place to store this information. And then we can add the attr of toys so that we have access to that empty array because it is still an attribute. So now Fido.toys is an empty array. And we'll work with this more later. Cindy, was that what you were asking about?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome.
Thank
I'm
you.
really glad you asked that question. Okay, Jesse?
Must we always use symbols in our attr line?
Yes. That is the syntax. So if you do this, it will not work. We'll get an error. Let's see what our error is. Undefined local variable or method breed. So when we have it like this, it's looking for a variable called breed, which is not what the attr is expecting. It's expecting a symbol. And so this symbol is kind of like a shortcut for this whole thing that we did before. And that's what Ruby's doing under the hood with this symbol, is referring to this kind of pattern. And that's why the name, the symbol, has to match whatever the attribute is that it's reading.
And if I can ask a follow-up to that, if we did define another method named name, which one takes precedence here, I guess?
Sure. My first question would be, why would you ever do that? Right? And I don't mean that in a mean way, just saying, like, thinking about developing in a very clear way. We wouldn't want to introduce this kind of gray area or this uncertainty, but it's a good question for exploration. So let's look at what it does. So now if we do Fido.name, interesting. So this took precedence, the actual defined method.
Okay. That was really just out of curiosity anyways. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I love it. Like, it's good to be curious to see exactly how this is working. But then I also just want to speak to those instances where we could introduce some uncertainty into our program, and we definitely don't want to do that. All right, this is great. Okay, any questions about how we access these attributes? Okay, let's talk a little bit about behaviors then. So we talked about the toys. Maybe we want a behavior for a dog where they can add a toy. And maybe in my head, this is like a collection of favorite toys for this dog. So I would love to be able to add a toy. So call a method. I'm just thinking this is what I want to exist. I want to be able to pass it the name of the toy. So like a pull string, right? Of course, that doesn't exist right now. We don't have a method, but that's what I want. I want a behavior where we can add a toy and then it gets added to Fido's toy bank. Okay, take about 3 minutes right now and just kind of play with this code. I know you don't have it, but if you have a notebook that you're following along in, how do you think we can accomplish this method? I want to be able to do Fido.add toy and pass it a string. Oh, so I guess it would be like a rope, right? Okay, and then when we did Fido.toys, what I would expect is that this would return an array with pull rope inside of it. That's what I would expect. So take a couple minutes to see if you can, just to try to write that method. And then I'll have someone share after a couple minutes. Okay. Do you want another minute, or how are you doing? Okay. Right. How Sean, how are you doing? You want to come off mute and help me explore this method?
Sorry, which one?
Yeah, which Sean?
Oh, okay. Good to know. We have two Sean S.
Okay.
Oh yeah. We have Sean with a U and Sean with a E and then Sean with a duh. I love it. Yes. Okay. Sean S.
So I was thinking, so in the class, you have to define a new method. So def add toy, and then in parentheses the variable. So toy name.
Okay, I like that.
And then in the middle, I was thinking you do the at toys.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Okay.
I would be surprised.
Actually, let me pause you right there to show some debugging. Like if you know, not you, Sean, but you collectively, if we know we want a method called add toy, and maybe that's all you know so far, and you're not quite sure how to accomplish the thing, the task. So what you can do is define your method and then put your pry inside that method. Then when this method is invoked, right here on line 7, I'm calling or invoking that method, then I'll hit that pry and it'll pause the execution of the program so that I could play with the variables I have available to me at that time. So if I run this, I can see right here in my pry that I am inside my method. So I might want to look at the variable that came in of toy name. So I can see that it's a string of pull rope, which is exactly what came in through here. Okay. And then I might want to I could look at my other instance variables like at name. I have access to those. I have access to at toys also. Okay. So Sean, if you can continue, what was the code that you were thinking might work inside of here?
So I was thinking do at toys, and then the rocket sign toy name.
The shovel?
Yeah, sorry, the shovel. that one.
So yeah, this sign is actually called a hash rocket, and then this thing is a shovel.
Shovel. Okay.
The toy name you said, right?
Toy name. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's see what that would do. Okay, that would add that in there. And then when we call the toys, it would have that string inside of our toy bank. Okay, so that this is how we can use Pry to kind of play with it. So it looks like that code, thank you so much, Sean. It looks like that code accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. So now I can literally, if I wanted to, just copy the code we did in Pry and replace it here. Because I put Pry exactly where the method was, whatever code I put in here will also work right here. So we're gonna take whatever the toy name is and we're gonna add it to our toys array. Cool. So let's run that again. I wanna put a Pry here because now I wanna test that once I did this behavior, that it actually added the toy to the toys bank, or the toys array, I guess I should say. All right, so now I can see Fido.toys. So remember here where my require Pry is, it should have already added that toy. And it did. Okay, so this method worked. So that was the behavior of adding a toy to this specific dog's toy bank, because that was on Fido. So Athena should still have 0 toys, because we didn't add that toy to Athena, we added it to Fido. Okay. Questions? Okay, let's go back to breakout rooms and we'll do a little bit more practice. Michael, go ahead.
Can you add multiple values to your array? Or do you need to change your parentheses structure?
Good question. So let's say, so if we do Fido.add toy again, and now I do like chew toy, what does everybody think? Will this still work for an additional toy? Chewy toy, oh gosh, friends like, wait, did I spell that right? Okay, the word toy is now no longer making any sense to me. So yeah, so it still adds it, and now Fido.toys now has 2 toys in it. Right? That is a really good observation, Michael, because whatever code you write should work for the first thing and should work for the millionth thing. Did you have a follow-up question, or did I just not put your hand down?
Yeah, could we add 2 elements to the array simultaneously, or will we have to change the structure to our parentheses?
Good question. So what I always say is if you have a question like that, hop in Pry and try it. Here's what I will say though, is generally speaking with the method, you want it to accept one data type or a specific data type. So maybe here, we're always assuming that this is gonna come in as a string. So then we wouldn't wanna start changing it to an array. It would throw off the consistency of our program. Could you? Yes, you could. But you're right, if the code can't handle that, it's gonna create some issues. So if you, let's just do like toy 1 and then toy 2. So pass that in, yes, it will work, right? But now we have what's called a nested array, where the third element of this array is an array itself. So there's some stuff you could do with that. You could flatten it, right? And that'll create a one-dimensional array. So this might be things that you need to take into consideration when you're building your methods to make sure it can handle a string or an array, or maybe you just want it to always take a string and you're not going to worry about an array because you just want it to always take a string. These are good things to consider. Okay. Other questions before I put you into breakout rooms? I missed a breakout room, so hold on, let me, so you're gonna work with your pairs and update your person class with this stuff that I'm gonna drop in your Slack channel right now. So you're gonna add some accessibility to the attributes so that you have methods, and you're gonna allow them to have a birthday so that their age will increase. And we'll probably do this probably about 7 or 8 minutes. Any questions?
It added to the age, but then it kept also returning a nil value.
Ooh, you want to share your screen?
That would not be on my particular screen. I wasn't the.
Who was your driver?
My driver was Shonda.
Sean with the duh. Right.
Yes, here we go.
Great. Okay, and so show me where it's returning a
So
nil.
when we have John dot have birthday, we see his birthday is coming up, but it's also giving us this nil.
I don't think, probably doesn't always return nil. So what is, let's see, you're sending in that. This method should still have a return value though. So I'm kind of looking at what all your cohort mates are saying. So let's do this. So what happens now? See, John had a birthday, right? So, oh, interesting. Okay, let's do this. Put a pry underneath line, let's put it under line 12 in your person.rb file. Yep, and then get rid of it on line 6 or comment it out. And then, yep, perfect. And then you'll want to actually invoke the method from your runner though, so we can, oh, actually, yeah. So invoke it, let's do John.haveBirthday. Okay, yep, and then let's go, you'll need to restart your pry. Pry does not update changes.
I don't have the fancy thing yet.
Oh, so you don't need that.
Or can I just run it?
Yeah, just run your runner file.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so let's look at age and what that is right now. What does that say? I can't see it.
54.
54, okay. So now like type in the exact code you have on line 14. Oh, and actually type in, here we go. Type in age with no @ sign. Okay, and so now type in the whole line on line 14. Okay, yeah. So that looks good, and it shouldn't be returning nil. It should just be returning that actual age. So type, did it actually increment?
Yes, yeah, I went to 55.
Okay, exit here. Well, and then let's put the pry back on the other side. And then I'll give some thoughts too, or some like a code improvement, but go ahead and run your runner again.
I don't think you saved the files.
Oh, thank you.
Good call, Sean.
Sorry, both files, your runner too.
Yeah, I think I got them.
There's still a blue dot on your runner.rb, so it's not saved.
Oh.
Okay. Cool. And now if we do John.haveBirthday, do we still get that nil? Were you in maybe you were in a different kind of pry session before? I'm not sure why it was doing that before, but it looks like it's fine.
Cool.
But what I'll say though is on line like 14, what was the thought process? Like, why are you running it? Like you're resetting the instance variable, but then you're calling the method after the equal sign. I'm just wondering if there was a thought process for that or not. Oh, we're about done.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, so you can
we could just do age +1.
Well, no, you do need to save it, but like on the 14, you could do @age +1, and then we have to wrap this up because you guys have an 11 o'clock lesson. I forgot. Well, you need to restore it though, right? We have to reset the instance variable. So you still need that equals, and then instance variable again @age. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's a little better. There is another shortcut for that though. If you did @age +=1, it's the shortcut for this exact syntax. But that's okay if we don't get to that. Yeah, now take away the, yep, exactly. And that will reassign your instance variable. So that should work fine. I think you might have been in a different kind of pry session, or if you haven't acquired the pry. So, okay, awesome. And then, because it should not have been returning nil. And then Garrett, did you have a quick question? And then we'll go ahead and end.
Yeah, I'm not sure how quick or not it was, but I guess I'm just kind of curious about the instance variable syntax and like using the @ symbol versus not using the @ symbol, and kind of maybe a little bit of a deeper understanding as to like why we're specifically using the @ symbol for these instance variables.
Yep.
And like what,
Because you have to. So because
I figure, but
and it has to do with scope, and we'll talk about scope later, but if we didn't have these, nothing would work, because this is called a local variable and it only works inside the method it's defined in. If we want to be able to have access to this information outside of this method, like here, it has to be an instance variable, because that expands the scope to the entire class, so that now any method can access these things.
so putting the @ allows us to just access it in a broader context than
yes.
just the specific piece of code. Okay.
Yep. Cool. All right, cool. So just to quickly recap, we did talk about how we create classes, what the syntax is for the class, as well as the file name. We talked about how to add state or attributes with instance variables. Specifically, we add those in the initialize method. We talked about this @reader shortcut, which creates a method, The @reader creates a method. There's a reason I'm saying this a million times. By this specific name that reads back the value of the attribute. And then we can manipulate those values by adding other behaviors or other methods that access those instance variables directly. Okay, awesome. All right, I'm gonna end this so that you can go to your next lesson. So sorry, I meant to give you a little bit of a break. I will
stay here.
Oh, stay here.
You stay here. Can you make me the host?
Yep. Will that